Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. Today is another episode of Top Tier Tweaks. Lille is a special event that's happening this weekend, and both myself and Jack are attending. So this could give you some good insight into the last tournament that we have before Lost Thunder kicks in. So let's see how the top tier decks are competing against each other to remain competitive. Kicking it off with Buzzrock, it did take up 4 of the top 8 spaces in Memphis, so definitely a powerful archetype. I think the biggest thing to come out of those tournaments were the increased reliance or the increased usage of Lycanroc being a big revelation in the format. Lots of them turning to a high count of double colors energies. I've added in 1 to this list from previous Buzzrock builds, but I've also thrown in an EXP share. I think both of these in combination does really help you get that Lycanroc going a lot more frequently. Lycanroc obviously very important against the Malamar matchups because he just is a big tanky 200 hit point Pokemon, whereas in every other case they can just use things like a Baby Deoxys to deal with you. The Lycanroc forces out big GX attackers a lot of the time, and that helps your prize trade eventually, whilst at the same time being able to pull something up and take 2 prizes on it sometimes if they've had to use Lille, for example. So the increased reliance or use of Lycanroc is really going to help out Malamar, which is, it is technically still a negative matchup for you, but increasing these cards is going to make that a closer matchup, which I think is really important right now because these Psychic Malamar lists are going to be very rampant, to be honest, because it did end up winning Memphis at the end of the day and came second, so they're definitely going to be around. So having a few more answers to that deck is going to be the biggest challenge, really, for the Buzzrock players. I think Field Blower is an important inclusion to mention as well, just because lots of Zoroark players will be playing Weakness Policy. We saw the return of Zorolock making it into the top 8 with Grant Manley, and that's obviously using Weakness Policy, so being able to gust those off is going to be important. No real other big things to note here. We've seen Buzzrock in many different iterations, to be honest, in all of the top 8 lists, but this is where I've landed. If you want to see me playtesting this exact 60, I did do a stream of it just the other week, so check back on the channel for that. On to Buzzshrine. I think Buzzshrine is sort of seen a bit of a dip in play. I think because of the Sylveon placement in Frankfurt winning the tournament, a lot of people were kind of worried to play it in Memphis because of that mill fear. But I think with more, Orangaroos going into Zoroark decks and Malamar naturally just having more answers and switching cards and stuff like that, the mill seems to be in a worse spot, and that opens the door once again for Buzzgarb Shrine to do very well. I still like playing a 2-1 Weavile. I think that gives you a lot of options. Very nice against Dawnwing specifically, which is otherwise somewhat of a headache that the Psychic Malamar players will go for. Having a check to that is nice. Also being extra help against Zoroark is always great, stopping them just running rampant on their board. From there, not too much exciting stuff to say here. My energy count's a little bit funky. Instead of just having 4 units, I'm playing 2 fighting energies, just because I think it's a little bit safer once again against Zorolock. Always something that's got to be on your mind, even though you are a fully non-GX fighting deck with Weavile and Garb. Removing energies is pretty much their only win condition, so not giving them an E-Hammer target every single turn is going to be reasonable for you for hopefully building up into swing around turns in combination with like counter energy in random spots, or just building up basic energy cards onto Buzz if they're trying to gust around and deal with things like your Slugmas or your Sneasels and stuff like that, because we present so many threats against that deck. I do think the Garbodor is still important for the Buzzgarb matchup, whilst also being great, as well as the Weavile, against Psychic Malamar. So I think this deck still has a lot of good answers. I think Mill is pretty much your only auto loss. You have answers for Ray with the Weavile, and early pressure with the Buzz package. We're basically seeing this Buzzwole package in a load of decks right now, and it's just so inherently strong that it's going to see success all over the place. So I think that's everything to note. One quick little tidbit is that I still like playing 4 Cynthia over 4 Lily. Typically what I found is you actually want to shuffle your hand a lot more than just have like 4 physical Lily, because you'll end up being in a spot where you just have cards that you can't play down, like excess shrines or excess energy cards or just excess supporters sometimes, and you want to get Smooth Over plus Instruct working for you, and like the Lily wouldn't really help that. So you're still getting like 1 or 2 draws, whereas Cynthia's some nice just random shuffle as well. So I am slightly enjoying 4 Cynthia instead of 4 Lily right now, but that's just a personal preference thing from my own testing here and there. Personally, I've been testing a lot more Buzz Weavile and not been using Garb so much, but Garb is obviously great for the Buzzrock matchup, so just a little tidbit from me there. On to Psychic Malamar, I mentioned it a lot. It is definitely a big contender in the format. The revelation of Chimecho in the gas can lists being incorporated has been a really big deal for it getting much better against the Zoroark matchups, which is definitely a big deal. That Bell of Silence, stopping them put down things with abilities. Also very good against Vikaray, of course, and to an extent can even slow down like Shrine decks and stuff, stop them getting their Mag Cargo engine going. So it can just slow down a bunch of things, and when you slow stuff down, it gives you more time to build up your Malamars, and this deck is super threatening when you have 2 or 3 Malamars on the board, because you can just power up any of these tech attackers for the right matchup, essentially. I think there aren't too many other key decisions that are that exciting. I think the Lunala Prism Star is a great inclusion. Obviously good against some of the Baby Buzz Garb stuff because it has that resistance to fighting and 160 hit points, which is insane. Also a huge card for the mirror match. That's pretty much why it was inserted into the deck, because it forces GX attackers onto their board a lot of the time, unless they're going to use a Mimikyu or their own Lunala Prism Star. I think this is important to play. Also having that Full Moon Star as a potential option if you've missed early in-Ks but still found energy in your discard pile, because you are playing 4 escape boards. You can definitely make that work for you and get a Full Moon Star even onto itself, or maybe like a Deoxys on the bench and Guzma into the next turn, whatever. So I think this is a nice one-of to include to improve your mirror, because of course that's going to be very important to tech for. At the moment I'm just playing for a skateboard and no like escape rope or switch. I know that some of the guys in the US did play an extra switching card. Right now, I think it's a little bit too niche. Obviously, you are playing a Lunala Prism Star, which has a chunky retreat cost, so there's kind of more reason to play it, but I still like playing 4 Guzma instead of 3 plus a switch card. When you're only playing 1 and we don't have any like Mag Cargo, not even any a huge draw engine in general, I don't feel like it's worth it. I would personally just have 4 Guzmas all the time because it's such an inherently strong card. Another quick note from me is that I like playing an 11th physical energy rather than playing 1 Oricorio. For that Vital Dance, because this deck does get kind of cluttered with the amount of Pokemon that you end up having to put on your board. If you're having like Lele, Let Loose, Oricorio, you're not having any space for your Malamars anymore, let alone your real attackers. Like, if you happen to lead a Marshadow GX in a certain matchup where you don't need it, you've already lost a bench slot. And then if you're having to use Vital Dance to get energy out, it just all feels kind of wrong. I would like to just keep my board clear, have as many in-Ks going as possible, as many of the right attackers in the right matchups as possible. So I'm just going to play an extra energy card and not play an Oricorio. But again, that's just me. I know the guys who played it do swear by it, but from personal testing, it just doesn't make sense. We'll move on to Vikaray. This actually did really well at the special event in Chile, I believe. It won the tournament, and it incorporated Lysander Labs. This can be a really nice card actually for the Malamar matchup. If you happen to cheese it out and get one of your 2 copies early enough, you can stop escape boards getting them into their Chimecho, which actually means that they can't disrupt you with Bell of Silence early on, which is actually a really big deal because you can get into your Vikavolt and get rolling, which is obviously great. But even throughout the game, they are really reliant on that escape board so that they can promote something, charge up a bench dude, and then go into it straight away. This Lysander Labs is going to give them a huge headache. So I think it's a very big card for that matchup. It is, a little bit annoying that you don't play your own choice bands or baton, something I've been a big fan of. But I think in order to improve your Mali matchup, that's really important. It also can mitigate some early pokes that like Buzzroll players do against you, and just stops choice band altogether in like the Shrine decks, and that's a big component of their damage output because their inherent attacks aren't that powerful. So Lysander Labs is a nice card to include into the list. Other than that, everything's really standard. I'm gritting my teeth and putting Steven's Resolve in the list right now, just based on stats more than anything else. I would never play Steven's Resolve, but statistically it's been in a lot of the Vikaray lists. You can definitely cut the card if you want to just play that 7th Lightning Energy, which is a little bit cheeky on my side. But I had to just say, you know what? Steven's Resolve has been in enough of these stage 2 decks that you sort of have to give it credit where credit's due. Other than that, the 1 Shining Lugia, 1 Delmai split. Delmai is still really good at threatening Lycanrocs, which I think is a big enough deal to keep in the deck. Powerful Spin, of course, can still deal with Baby Buzzes and Garbs here and there if you need him to. Shining Lugia much better in that role because he can chain Aero Forces way more often. Argent Wing as well isn't a bad attack for just 3 colorless, and it has that nice resistance on top. So 2 very good non-GX attacking threats with 2 stretchers I think is fine. And that Lysander Labs definitely does help out against the Malamar matchup, which is a big deal. Something we definitely are concerned about right now. Moving on to the final one, a Zoroark deck, obviously. I never really want to talk about more than one Zoroark deck. Last time we looked at Zoroark, I still think that's in a fine place. I still think it's just a very, very inherently powerful deck. But Zoroark has been the most recent top performer, and I think this deck looks to be very good. There are 2 changes I made from Grant's list. I incorporated a Sudowoodo and a Deoxys, cutting 1 Slugma and 1 Choice Band, because I believe the Deoxys can be pretty nice at combating big Buzzwoles that can get out of hand sometimes. If they are going to have, pop off of B-strings and stuff like that. I also like it at being the only Pokemon other than Oranguru and Zorua in our deck that doesn't have an ability, so you can actually keep attacking into Chimechos and stuff. So it's a small thing, but that Psychic can actually be really important for you. And the other card I've incorporated is a Sudowoodo with that Roadblock. I mentioned when I was talking about Malamar how integral their bench is. Taking 1 away from them is just so bad. So Roadblock's very good against Mally, and it's also a big card for mirror matches as well, to be honest. Because it can keep your Oranguru out of range from Righteous Beating without them having to use a Kukui. And as you know, when it comes down to like a resource management war, they're not really going to be wanting to use Kukui. They want to use other cards a lot of the time, Plumerias a lot of the time. So Roadblock is going to be really annoying for them. And even if it's not a straight up mirror, it's going to be annoying for all other Zoro decks having to dig with their to try and find Kukui and stuff like that. So, yeah, I like the Roadblock for Zoro mirrors as well. Other than that, I think Zoroark is just a pretty strong functional deck right now. I also made one other change, which was adding a Countercatcher in over a 3rd Guzma. I think it's just a nice card that you can keep resource managementing back a lot of the time. Some of the key cards you'll look for, things like Stretcher, Max Potion, E-Hammer, Countercatcher, Switch. These are the sort of cards you'll be looking for with your resource management alongside like Pal Pad or just the physical supporters themselves. Cutting down 1 Choice Band is a little bit weaker against things like Vicaray because the control sort of strategy isn't that great. But that's something you're going to have to pretty much just manage. I think Vicaray is already kind of declining, even though it is still a top tier deck. I think the fear of sort of the Chimecho in Malamar decks does give it somewhat of a headache. So I think going down to 2 Choice Bands, especially because we've increased our Pokemon count from Grant's list by 1, I think is a little bit safer. The Shrine still is in the deck, as it can be nice against Rayquaza, as he anecdotally said. It's also pretty nice just in general for putting Lele's into your range a lot of the time with a Choice Band. So do bear that in mind. It can be pretty nice for you. Other than that, though, I think this is a pretty reasonable Zoroark. I've not been the one testing this out a lot. I know Jack's been very intrigued with the list and has played a few games with it, and that's pretty much where he's landed. I think the only other thing he changed was flip-flopping a Cynthia for a Lily just to have a slightly better turn 1 draw supporter, but again, just a super niche thing. It's not something that we really need to discuss in great detail. So that rounds off the 5 decks that are sort of top of the tier right now. I think Buzz Shrine is actually in a way better spot than it was for Memphis. I think Mill is naturally just a worse play because every Zoro deck is picking up Oranguru, and Zoroark especially is going to be hard for it. I think Vicaray and Gascan inherently can have the outs to beat it quite naturally. I mean, my lists aren't that, teched for the sort of mill variants. Gascan, I'm just playing the 4 skateboards, but they could have extra switch cards or just a second Dawn Wings, and it pretty much auto wins. Vicaray, I think, is absolutely fine. You could change those Lysander Labs for Choice Bands and improve your matchup, stuff like that, and add in an extra switch, or even just throw a Tantalizer in over like a Cynthia, and even that just can improve your win rate a lot. Buzzrock as well. If you want to improve your win rate, you could play the Zygarde. I didn't actually mention Mill as like a top deck because I really think that a lot of the decks that I've just mentioned do have the answers. Buzz Shrine being like the only one that has no answers to the deck. But I think, with all the other top contenders potentially being able to beat it quite handily, it puts Mill in a much worse position, which puts Buzz Shrine kind of like back on the map in my opinion. Definitely one I've got my eye on closely. Another fun deck that I've been toying around with was another thing from Memphis where a few top players did end up making some top 32 and top 16 placements even, I think, with both Coco Persimmon and a Coco Buzzwole list, which is more close to what I'm showing you right now. Trying to do a bunch of flying flips, set up damage, use Magical Swap with counter energy to close out the game in a lot of situations, alongside Shrine doing lots of damage, incorporating that with Marshadows and Judges, as well as Enhanced Hammers to slow down lots of decks and hopefully buy you extra turns of flying flip. You're using that Roadblock Sudowoodo once again. Super annoying for Zoroark. I know it's super annoying for Zoroark. I know it's counterintuitive to give your opponent one less bench space, so you're doing less damage with Flying Flip. Now you're doing 100 instead of 120, essentially. But against Zoroark, they only have 2 Kukuis and Palpad, and if you don't have the Sudowoodo down, they can just have like one Zoroark going and just keep smacking. Us having the 2 Judges, the 2 E-Hammer, the Marshadow, and the Sudowoodo means they need to put lots of Zoroarks into play, which means Shrine is doing more damage, which means, the Buzzwole has plenty of targets throughout the game to deal with. So the Sudowoodo, as well as these other cards, are all in here just to improve your Zoroark matchup, to make sure that they have to draw cards every turn to keep dealing with your Coco turn by turn, or dealing with Buzzwole, for example. So the deck is very straightforward in terms of what it tries to achieve. You have the Fairy Leles to do Psywaves against Rayquazas, you have the Buzzwoles to do stuff against Zoroarks, and in general you'll always have a Sledgehammer turn if you need to deal with a big threat. We are playing Diancie and Beast Energy, as well as like Shrine and Choice Band already, so that can deal with something. If they're just trying to go hard with one main attacker and not really develop much on the bench, you can punish them with that Buzzwole. The Coco in general, such a good card against Malamar, as well as that one Latios that I've added into the deck to improve your Buzz Rock matchup, but also be very good as well against Malamar for extra sniping. You can obviously do a 60-30. You can deal with early in-Ks, and dealing with early in-Ks, it's taking prizes, but it's also stopping them attacking at some points, because it stops them building up lots of energy cards, which down the line can help you in your spread approach regardless. So really, really nice card when you're playing, 3 free retreaters and 8 Ball Search cards that can find a Latios early in the right spots. You can definitely make that work out for you. And even Lagoon Flight is something you can bear in mind if like Buzzrock players are trying to gust around this guy, because he has that annoying hit points, and in every other situation they can just be like bopping Cocos or bopping Oranguru for just 1 energy a lot of the time. You don't really want that to happen, so you want to promote those Latioses and make it harder for them to take prizes early on, and put pressure on them. If they've led a Buzz GX, definitely punish them with Breakthrough with Choice Band. That's pretty much the idea here. I think the draw engine is something I'm sort of like concerned about. I don't know whether or not I want to try a Magcargo in the deck, just like how we've seen other Buzz Shrine builds previously work. The big sort of stickler for this deck in particular is that you want to have these Marshadows and Judges to keep decks slow and keep them, in random spots you'll just win games because they've had like 2 turns of not doing the stuff they need to do to deal with Coco, and you'll just win the game off of that. So that's how this list differs from your standard Magcargo build, because otherwise you could just cut out Copycats, cut out Tantalizers, cut out Judges, bump up your Lille line, add in some Acrobikes, add in Magcargo, and it'll be more similar to previous Buzz builds we've seen. You can even cut out the Energy Lottos if you're playing the Magcargo at that point. But the key to this deck is that you're trying to make them miss a step here or there, and the Marshadow and the 2 Judge are trying to help you do that. Another note is you could play an amount of units and an amount of rainbows, so you improve your Lagoon Flight odds. I don't think it's a big enough deal. I think a lot of the time you're just using Breakthrough with this guy, and you have the counter energy option anyway, and you do fall behind a lot of the time. So I don't think it's a big enough deal to add in rainbows, because it can push things into range, which is a bit annoying. So I feel like that's still the best option, just to play the pure units as well as the DC's counters, etc. But yeah, I think these sort of spread decks, because they naturally have such a good Malamar, and they have, with all the tech cards, I think you have a really solid Zoroark as well, to be honest. And with the Fairy Lele, you have a pretty solid Rayquaza. I think inherently your list is just janky, but if you put enough early pressure on the board whilst going for a Judge at the same time, like you just insert Tech Attacker into the active, play a Judge. Sometimes that just wins the game straight up, and if it's not winning the game straight up, it's giving you more time to do more flying flips and stuff like that. So it is really a dangerous deck, and it's preying on the fact that we have such little good draw support in the format right now. Maybe this deck gets way worse post Lost Thunder, because we start seeing Sightseers and we start seeing Elms being put into decks, but until that happens, you can still just Judge and get people out of the game before they even start. And that's a big element of how this deck takes wins, and it's something that, we saw at Memphis work a lot for some of these top players. So do bear that in mind. You just have easy mode non-GXs hitting for good type coverages right now, which does, at the end of the day, cover a lot of the matchups that we see in the sort of top 5 decks. I think the hardest matchup for this sort of build would be something like Buzzrock. If you can't get them hurt by Judge or Marshadow early on alongside Stretchering Latios, you're going to have a bad time overall. So that is going to be it, guys, for my top tier tweaks before Lille. We'll be moving on to Lost Thunder soon. We'll be having to do a top 10 for Brazil, and potentially a top tier tweaks for that as well. Maybe a bit of both. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, back to the Lost Thunder stuff as of tomorrow. So look forward to that. Let me know what you guys think about the 5 lists I demonstrated. What are you going to be playing at Lille? What do you expect to be the best deck? Is there a deck that's off the radar right now that could be really well positioned? I'd love to hear it all down below. For now, though, it has been Joe from OmniPoke, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.